welcome to a quick chat with the unemployed alcoholic. Who am I talking to?
Hey, it's Matt Zerilli. I'm a stand-up comedian and person in recovery from Traverse City.
Recovery guy.
Yes, indeed. It's been a while now. April 1st was my 15 year.
Well, congratulations on 15 years, my friend.
Thank you. I never would have thought I'd be sitting here talking about 15 years, but it's pretty impressive and it adds up quick. It doesn't seem like it at first, but after a few days, it really just kind of racks up.
Yeah, recovery is a wonderful thing. That's part of my story as well. But so what led you to recovery?
Well, one of the things I say in my act a lot is I had a real heart-to-heart with the state of Michigan.
Ah,
And I always, when I'm talking to folks, and I'm also a certified recovery coach and manage a community center up here that's all geared toward people early in recovery. And one of the things I always say is I'm always the last one to know. Everybody else around me knew, the court system knew, and it took me a while to get it through my head that I drank to excess, causing basically all the problems that I've ever had in my life around legal problems and relationship problems are all rooted in my addiction issues.
you said everybody else knew?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody in my family and all my close relationships, they were all aware that I was a kind of a train off the tracks for a number of years. There was a period of time where I realized I wanted to stop, but just didn't think it was realistic.
You didn't think it was realistic?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of period of ambivalence is one that we play in a lot, where people just can't picture their lives without their substance, whatever that is. That it's just not something that you can imagine that you can shake, because it's a challenging thing. It grips you. It can grip everything, and it becomes such a part of your identity that it can be hard to shake. It can feel impossible to shake. It's not impossible, but it can feel that way.
I see, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned identity, so that alcohol was a big part of your identity?
I remember one of the stories. I've been telling this story a lot lately. I was the guy at every party. I was that guy. And I remember after I had gotten in some legal trouble, I got my second DUI, and it was just this untenable thing. But I still, early in recovery, still wanted to connect with people. That was the big thing. I still wanted to be able to go out and connect with people. And I had this network of acquaintances. As I come to realize now, they were just acquaintances. But there was a period of time where I was going to parties and actually putting water in beer cans.
Mm.
Just because it was such a part of my identity and such a part of my I guess personality at that time, that it was too hard to let it go. It was like this thing of comfort that I just couldn't let go. The crutch.
So it sounds like socially, you were dependent on it as much as like physically.
Oh, definitely. I think that's the thing that I kind of rail against and try to bring awareness to most in my work up here in Traverse City, is that the social identity up here is so much like there's a microbrew on every corner. There's a distillery on every corner. We've got the cycle pub up here that's always running around downtown with people, going from bar to bar. We have Paddles and Pints, which is this kayak group that goes from bar to bar. I mean, it's become like this bachelor party, central for, Michigan. So it's just this double-edged sword of people are immersed in it in our culture up here, but it's also undertreated, I think, and there's still a stigma about seeking treatment, and there's a stigma about the disease model of addiction that it's just this kind of, this community, our community here kind of talks out of both sides of its mouth. So that's the big awareness that I try to build. Is just because something's legal doesn't mean that it can't be abused.
Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Yeah, and the discussion around that, I think, is more palatable when you really start thinking about the source of an addictive um, of addiction, right? So it's how you approach things. So for me, I can be addicted to my cell phone, which is something that social media and my cell phone is definitely something that I work on, trying to find space with, and it can take over. And it's a very similar thing where you get the same kind of dopamine blips from, whether it be social media or gambling or, pornography. There's a million different things that people use in those spaces. Work, that can be something that can be abused for anything that gives you that kind of dopamine reward. We see a lot of cases of, people that shoplift. So it's kind of this idea, it's really trying to destigmatize the idea that because somebody uses an illicit substance, or their addiction leads them to like some kind of a criminal activity. For me, it was, driving drunk and just kind of being a general all around knucklehead,
Yeah.
fighting and all this stuff that you do. So, but if you can really kind of break that down to look at it internally instead of externally, right? And I have to remind myself about that. Just because I put the bottle down doesn't mean I don't still have the same way that I approach the world, and will still try to jam things in that space, no matter what that is.
It sounds like you have developed a real awareness of that pattern.
Yeah, I mean the intention, right? So it's about thinking about, am I doing this as a distraction, or am I doing this as something to enhance the world, right? So, and I'm real open on stage. I mean, you probably see me do it. I'm real open on stage about therapy. I'm real open about manic depression. I'm open about all this stuff, and I talk about it a lot because I think that's the key. It took me about 6 years into my recovery to really start to understand that alcohol was the best way that I used to kind of treat my manic depression, right? So it was just this way of doing it. But now I'm on medication, and there are other things that I do, but it's really about looking at kind of breaking down. And this is deep stuff. You said, you warned me that we might get deep. It's really about kind of peeling back the onion and seeing, you know, one of my early sponsor of mine told me once, and I didn't understand this when he told me at first, but I think about it all the time. He said, I used to wish that I was just perfect and didn't have my problems. Now I'm just glad that I have my problems and I know what my problems are, right? So we're all flawed in some way, and that's part of the game. Like, that's just part of the way it works. Awareness is the best thing that we can do. And I tell people all the time, and try to remind myself all the time, there's a million different ways to maintain recovery. There's a lot of different pathways. There's a lot of different, there's AA, smart yoga, people do all kinds of stuff, transcendental meditation, all that kind of stuff. What it really comes down to is understanding the space between your impulse and your action,
Mm,
how you react to your impulses. Is that space, whatever you can figure out in your life to lengthen out that space between impulse and reaction, is going to be, that's it. I mean, that's the space that I try to live in. And it's easier some days than others. And I don't always win.
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and that's part of it too. And people that are out there, that listen to your show that are struggling in addiction, have, relapse is a part of it. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And that's not just picking up the bottle or picking up your substance again. It's, you can relapse into that way of thinking. And it takes consistent work. I mean, that's just what it is. For whatever reason, we drew this card of being addictive personalities. But that's our stuff. And there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of people out there that have done it, and you can own that decision. I'm real proud. I'm proud, and really excited to be in recovery. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Well, and you mentioned, that addiction was a big part of your identity, and now recovery treatment is a big part of your identity.
No doubt. Yeah, it's a big thing. I remember that same sponsor I was telling you about. I had probably been sober about 3 years, and I called him. I just had this feeling. You get that feeling when things start to finally click, and you feel like you're starting to kind of become yourself again, and own your body and your mind and your spirit again. And I remember calling him up, and I was like, "This, I don't know what to do." I was just so happy. I was like crying tears of joy. I was, like I said, about probably maybe 2-3 years in, and he said, "Yeah, this is what it's supposed to feel like all the time."
Mm, wow.
And I was like, "Oh, so that for me is the part that I want to be able to tell other people and show other people, right? That
Hmm.
you don't have to wake up every morning coughing up a pack of cigarettes and wondering what you did with, what happened and where you are and all that kind of stuff, which I did for years. But now I've been sober longer than I drank now. It was wild.
Oh, oh.
And I'm real grateful. I mean, still relatively young. I got sober when I was 27. One way or the other, I didn't have much of a choice, as many of
Yeah.
us do. We kind of back into recovery.
Yeah, yeah. There's some things that are under our control and some things that are not.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that kind of joyous or positive vibe with sobriety. Is that kind of where comedy came into play?
I'd always wanted to do it, and I'm really grateful that I did it. I've never done. I was sober when I've only been doing comedy for about 5 years, so I was about 9-10 years into recovery, and I was just looking for an outlet. And I always used to write. I wanted to write like the great American novel. I wanted to be Hemingway, but it always just came out as like goofy jokes. So I was like, and I've always loved this. I've always been kind of a nerd for stand up. When I was a kid, I used to watch the VH1 stand up spotlight, and like a lot of kids probably watch sports. I would watch all the comics, and I would know all the comics and just kind of all their styles and stuff. And again, another kind of thing in my life that I never thought would be even a real. I'm like, oh, I'd love to do comedy, but there's just no way that it's just not, it's just not a thing that I'll be able to do. And then there was this kind of the comedy of coincidences that happened. I had a good friend who knew somebody who produced stand up here, and just it all kind of just fell into place. And I went and tried it. He said, I met with them over coffee, and he basically said, I'm going to put you on next month. So you got 3 weeks to put 5 minutes together or whatever. And I remember it was in the winter time, and I just obsessed over that 5 minutes. I just obsessed over it, obsessed over it, obsessed over it. And there's still a couple. I mean, it was bad. It was real bad. But there's still a couple jokes that I do that came out of from that first set, because it was one of my first real big laughs. Really, my first laugh on stage. That was it. I was hooked. It was at Studio Anatomy in Traverse City, and I remember the exact joke. It was about being raised Catholic, and I got that laugh on that joke of kind of, oh, this is just an idea that I had, and people enjoyed it. So ever since then, it's just kind of this thing of like, how can I dig in and find those perspectives again? And I love it. I love stand up more than anything. And it's just that it is as close to, it's a spiritual experience in my personal opinion. I mean, that in my experience, there is something spiritual about a room full of people laughing together and being together in that space for that moment. I mean, it's magical, and you've experienced that. It's just there's nothing like it. It's electricity. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot in your story, Matt, that I can relate to.
Yeah.
Both you and I are recovery guys. Both you and
Mm-hmm.
I have done comedy. We've found that magic that you talk
Mm-hmm.
about, where something beautiful happens when a whole room full of people start laughing together.
Yeah, it's special. And I've said before, it doesn't even feel like, that's why we practice. I do a lot of stage time. I mean, as well, not right now because coronavirus has been a little challenging, but when I get on stage a lot, and it's like, working out. You got to kind of work out a lot, but when that moment happens where you get the crowd in the right place, it's like that's why you practice, right? Because it feels like there have been times I've gotten on stage where I don't even know, I feel like I'm part of the crowd. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like we're all just there together, kind of doing this thing that's spiraling toward the ceiling together, which is great. Yeah, I love it. I love comedy. It's the best.
Well, you should love it. It seems like it's a way for you to be transparent and
Yeah.
share some of the things that you've learned in a very positive and enjoyable way.
Yeah, and it's also this really weird way of doing. It's a really weird way of kind of bringing the message of recovery to people, which is a really interesting thing. Because I tell people all the time when I'm working with them as a recovery coach or at the community center. If you'd have told me 15 years ago that I'd be going around bars all over Michigan, making people laugh, it's crazy, but it's also hilarious because I've had people come up to me after shows and be like, "Well, wow, I was going to buy you a drink," but then they'll ask you questions about recovery, and just who knows? You never know who's going to kind of grab onto that message. It's my favorite way to kind of engage with people in that on recovery for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I can just relate so strongly with that because you and I have the exact same mindset with
Yeah,
that. Not only is comedy enjoyable, but comedy, while being honest and transparent about tough things like addiction, like mental health.
yeah,
I've even done some material on suicidal thoughts
yeah,
and some really dark things that normally are taboo to talk about. And there's something magical about the realm of comedy that you can address some real painful things and maybe spark a question from somebody
hmm.
who is looking for some answers.
Everybody feels these human things, but they're taboo to talk about. And I think sometimes the role that we can play is to get, to kind of kick the door open a little bit and make people laugh. Like I said, the joke's on me. I always am very cautious about pointing it really at anybody else.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's wise.
yeah, but the point is, hey, I'm out here. I feel this stuff. I've experienced this stuff. It's kind of part of the, existential comedy that we're all living in. And
Yeah,
people want
yeah,
to, when people can relate to that, that's the special thing. I mean, I've had people come up to me after show, which is not why I do it. I mean, I just want to make people laugh. But I've had people come up to me after shows and say, "Whoa, that was really, I really appreciate that you talked about, you know, uh, like I said, manic depression. I talk about therapy. I talk about all this kind of, I'll find ways to kind of insert that into everything, into a lot of the stuff that I do, and people will acknowledge that and say, "Oh, that was interesting. It was interesting to hear you talk about that. Here's something that I've experienced." And that's always cool when you can really hit a chord with people.
yeah, yeah. Well, Matt, you're doing it.
Yeah,
You're attacking the stigma, my friend. You are making some of these topics that are taboo and topics that people don't want to talk about, you're making them okay to talk about.
yeah,
And that's helping people. You're helping people. You're helping people from the stage, and you're also helping people professionally with the work that you're doing up there in recovery, and you're also helping people personally. Your personal relationships and the example that you set, it shows people that it is not only possible, but it's okay to have joy, to have fun while you're in recovery. In fact, some of us that have been on the same road know that there's more joy. There's
oh yeah,
Yeah, there's just wonderful things down the road of recovery. And then the purpose, and I can speak to this because it's so much the same with me. But that idea of carrying that message forward and sharing with people some of the truths that we've found, it's incredible. And you're doing it, man. You're crushing it all the way around.
well, thanks, man. It's important, I feel like, to be the person that I wish would have had I could have heard when I was younger.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
like part of it, what encourages me to get out there is to be, what I would have what I needed to hear when I was, 20, 25, in that space, that it's not, you can still have fun sober. It's okay to laugh at yourself. It's all that stuff. It's
yeah.
important.
Ellen, you touched on it earlier. You said that you weren't sure if you were going to be able to be sober.
Yeah.
But I would take that even a step further with myself. I wasn't sure that I wanted to.
Yeah.
I didn't know a whole lot of sober people that were leading lifestyles that seemed enjoyable to me.
Right.
And you are, and I think
Yeah.
I am as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think for us to showcase the fact that we're enjoying life and having fun while being sober, that's an
Yeah.
important message.
Absolutely, man. It's good. It's a
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah. Well, hey, we are going to take a quick break. I'm so glad to know a little bit about who Matt Zerilli is. You are a good man, my friend, and we
Well,
want to
thank
dig
you.
into we want to dig into a little bit more about what's going well in your life and one or a couple things that you might be struggling with. So, hey, thank you all for listening. We're going to be right back with more from Matt Zerilli. Welcome back to a quick chat with the unemployed alcoholic. I'm here with Matt Zerilli, and we're learning a little bit about who he is. And also, Matt, let me know something that is going well in your life right now.
Well, I this quarantine has been interesting. in many ways. But one of the things that I'm really grateful for, and I've been really on a good path with, is about, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, I started having a lot of trouble with. I was really busy with work and traveling a lot for comedy. Every weekend, nights and weekends, I was driving all over the state, and I had a job where it was basically a 24-hour job where I was kind of on call, managing inpatient recovery centers, and there was just I was not taking very good care of myself, and I started to have a lot of I was overweight. I had a lot of sciatic problems in my back, and I had an incident. This is probably 2 winters ago now, where I actually was in the hospital. I had to go to the hospital for a really bad sciatic event. I was essentially bedridden for about a week, and I had to get back into the gym. So I started kind of gradually working my way into that. My wife has been just a huge motivator for me. She gets to the gym every morning. She's one of those morning workout people, which I've never been. But she gets up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And anyway, she got me into the gym she was going to, and I got with this really cool community of people that are just really encouraging and you know offer a lot of really good advice and gym classes and kind of all the whole holistic thing, diet and all that stuff. And we really dug in. And then when this quarantine hit, we started really putting together a daily routine, which was, again, as we were talking about, something to focus on every day is so important. So we started setting aside this time, basically 60 minutes a day throughout the day, to do some kind of working out, and it's really paid off. So, I'm about a year and a half down the road. I've almost lost 40 pounds now.
Wow, congratulations.
It's been great, thanks. And it's really something that I've been able to. It's like a meditation, really. It's a way to really focus on something every day that's healthy, and I always feel better after I do it. I mean, of course, it sucks. Like, working out sucks. You know what I mean? Like, especially when it's hot outside and like you don't feel like doing it every day. But my wife and I have really been motivating each other. And again, the importance of having mentorship, right? Those people that work out, the trainers at the gym are so encouraging, and they're always there with a little bit of some challenges and stuff to keep us going. So that's been great, and I'm feeling really good about that. I actually went for a little run today, and I'm getting back into running again, which is crazy. I used to run marathons when I was younger, so it's kind of nice to get back into that again.
So,
Yeah,
it
it's been
sounds like quarantine hit and it opened up some white space or a little bit of margin for you to focus on some new healthier habits.
definitely. I didn't realize how, and this is we talked a little bit about my obsessive nature. Sometimes it takes just kind of being forced to put the brakes on to be like, okay, and that's what, again, I have this thing where I'm always the last one to know. So
Yeah.
here I am pushing out there, going downstate 2, 3 times a week, doing comedy and working way more than I should. It's like, okay, well, I can focus on self-care. So I feel like that physical self-care is going really well.
I've talked with a lot of people that have said something similar to that.
Mhm.
That initially the world kind of came to a screeching halt, and there was kind of some guilt and some bad feelings, like I need to be doing more. But then when
Right.
they actually embraced that margin, they found that some wonderfully healthy things came out of it.
Yeah, it's kind of this collective inhale that we all did. And there's some definite mindfulness available these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said. Definite
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness available.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what's one thing that you're struggling with, Matt?
Well, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's just kind of that general, there's a lot of anxiety out there right now. And
Mm,
I feel like it's manifesting socially in a lot of ways. It's been really challenging to see a lot of the kind of civil unrest that's happening,
yeah.
and kind of I'm pretty vocal about my feelings about this administration and kind of how that whole thing has added to a lot of the chaos. And
Hmm.
the coronavirus has been just a general anxiety around. I heard Tom Hanks was talking today about how he was basically equating this with World War II, where it's like we don't know when it's going to end, and we all have to kind of pitch in together. And it's that feeling of what is going to be normal, when are things going to get back to normal, particularly around, I guess the point that I would make is that it's tough when people are out there struggling with addiction, and that's the space that I live in my my work life
Yeah.
is making sure that people are, that we're available. The community center that we run up in Traverse City, we want to make sure people know they can reach out. But we're losing people. We've lost people to overdose. Um, it it's tough, and you try to be there for people, and there's really no way to do that sometimes. So that's the losing touch of people that are struggling because of these, social distancing and quarantining guidelines has been the thing that's been kind of the hardest for me to kind of level as we go forward. And we continue to work on that. Like I mentioned, there's some new tactics we're trying. We, initially tried to do the online connection stuff, and we're trying to open up some of the spaces and reach out to people. But it's tough. And I guess if there's one thing I would say is check in with your people. I mean,
Yeah.
this has really shown where the cracks are in our society and in us as individuals. I mean, there's a lot of stress out there, and it's starting to break in some spaces.
Yeah.
Um, so, not to get too heavy, but it's hard on people. When we were doing recovery coach training the other day, there was a therapist in there that was basically saying they're calling it, I think they're calling it COVID shock. Is
Mm.
A lot of the time they spend with clients now is just about this stress that people are feeling over this huge thing that none of us can control, right? So that's the biggest thing we all deal with, is what we can control. And it's really brought a lot of issues to the forefront: depression, suicide, addiction. People are out there struggling in silence, which is, it's always tough, but we do what we can.
It is tough. Me personally, this has been tough on. I can hear it in your voice that this has been tough on you in ways,
Yeah, definitely.
and certainly looking around at other people.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people that are struggling. You mentioned control.
yeah.
We have had control yanked away from us in ways that we never even thought possible.
That's really the thing, right? It's like, who would have even predicted that? I think that's so much a part of this. That's a great point you make, is that so much a part of this is how uncharted it is.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have asked me a year ago, like, there's always that thing you see on social media where if you show a picture of people in masks out walking around a year ago, what would you have even thought? There's just no mindset for it. We've had to kind of develop this whole new mindset kind of overnight, and it is really challenging. And yeah, I have good days and bad days. The bad days are a little fewer and farther between, but there's definitely days that it feels insurmountable. It's really challenging. So, the one thing I always try to say, and I'm trying to live by it myself and practice what I preach, is you got to check in with your people. Stuff like this is really cool. It's nice to be able to sit down and have a chat and kind of talk through this stuff. But think those people that you think might be doing okay might not be doing okay. I mean, that's the thing.
And it can be hard to reach out to people. I mean, there's times when I just don't feel emotionally up to it.
Right.
And it's okay to be aware of that and take some time away from checking in with people. You know me, I'm a man of faith,
Yeah.
and I feel like when somebody comes to my mind or my heart,
Mm-hmm.
it's a real good idea to follow that and connect with them.
Yeah.
So when somebody is placed on my heart or when somebody comes to mind, I feel that it's important to follow through and connect with that person.
Absolutely.
Well, Matt, I agree with you in the sense that a lot can come from a chat.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and that's part of the reason why I've started this podcast, is because I think just there's so much that can come out of just a couple of folks getting together for a quick chat.
Yeah.
So this has been good, Matt. How can people reach you for recovery or comedy or anything else?
My email is mattzerillicomedy@gmail. I'm on the social media stuff. I'm on Instagram as @reallyzerilli. Um, because it sounds the same. That's how I always tell people before shows. How do you say your name? I say really Zerilli. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter under really Zerilli. And another cool thing you can check out is I do a podcast called The Thing Podcast, which is basically like we talk about things in movies and music, stuff that makes us feel passionate about creating things.
Cool,
That's
cool.
what The Thing is all about, the capital T Thing. So you can check that out. It's over at thethingpod.com. And we're everywhere you can find podcasts. So that's another thing that we do. But yeah, and hopefully I'll be on stage somewhere near you sometime soon.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully we all will be back on stage.
Yeah, exactly. It's but we're trying not to rush it. We're doing it as in the most common sense way that we can, because comedy is very important, but it's also important that we take care of our fellow man here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I so much appreciate you popping by for a quick chat.
That was cool, man. Thanks for having me. That was really nice.
This has been a quick chat with the Unemployed Alcoholic, and I am Aaron, the Unemployed Alcoholic. If you ever want to reach me, my website is the best place to do so, theunemployedalcoholic.com. Of course, there's a bunch of content on there. There's videos of my stand-up. There's daily inspirational videos that I post. There's this podcast. There's another podcast I'm involved with called Clean Comedy Time, and just a ton of other stuff. Check that out if you have not already. Thanks for being you, and have a great day.
Awesome.